Hey guys, happy St. Patrick's Day. I wanted to talk a little bit about that video I posted a few days ago, telling you all to watch Jill Bolte Taylor's TED video about her stroke. Because I thought it was interesting that most people who responded thought it made perfect sense that neuroscience is, the more it probes into the workings of the brain and consciousness, the more it comes back with a sort of mystical perspective about it. Whereas others thought that what Jill did was almost an affront to the scientific method and sort of went against everything that science is supposed to be about, about remaining objective and at a distance from the phenomena that you're supposed to be studying. Of course, in Jill's case, taking a step back from your own stroke is a little bit difficult. Nonetheless, though, she was able, based on her understanding of the brain's workings and neuroscience, she was able to remain at least somewhat objective while she was having this stroke. And that's what gave her such great scientific insights into the nature of the brain, because she got to experience her own brain shutting down, or at least the left hemisphere of her brain shutting down. And the result of that shutdown was, for her at least, quite profound. And I just thought it was interesting the way people responded to her. Why is it that there seems to be a group of scientifically minded rationalist people who completely reject what she did by sort of blurring the line between science and spirituality, whereas other people find it either, an obvious result of in-depth study of human consciousness and the brain, or at least they were quite moved by her description of her experience. So some people called her a nut job, and some people thought it was beautiful. And what is the difference in temperament that divides people in this way? Is there really something inherently anti-scientific about spirituality? And I would say no, of course. And this is no surprise. I made tons of videos about this. I see a lot of affinity between science and spirituality, because both, when done or expressed correctly, are about not presupposing anything, not overlaying reality with any metaphysical gridwork, but just allowing our experience to come to us naturally. And based on that experience, then deriving provisional ideas of how best to interact with the phenomena, or how best to understand it and cope with it. And the scientists might say, well, spirituality is not about that. Spirituality is about believing in unseen realities, unseen forces, and gods, and powers. But then the spiritual person says, no, my professed sense of the reality of spiritual matters comes from my own direct experience. Whether I had a stroke like Jill, or I've ingested LSD or psilocybin, or I've had a seizure because I'm a temporal lobe epileptic, or I'm just normal and, had this spontaneous experience that just came to me one day when I was taking a walk. It seems obvious that the brain is capable of producing a state of consciousness that many people, after they've experienced, equate with God, or with the ultimate truth about reality, this mystical state of union with all the energy in the cosmos. That happens to people. The scientist who would reject what Jill did, that kind of blending or blurring of the line between science and spirituality, would say that these experiences are just mere physiochemical reactions in the brain, which I, as a spiritual person who has had experiences like this, would respond by saying, yeah, that's true. That's perfectly true. But I think I and anybody else who's probably had an experience like this would say, but that completely misses the point of what this experience meant as it was experienced. It's instead laying that metaphysical gridwork over reality, that sense that everything reduces to matter, to material, to the physical world. That's a metaphysical projection the scientist has no experientially based or empirical reason for asserting. Of course, real science, I would say, isn't materialist. Real science just observes and comes up with the best theory to match the observations, knowing full well that the theory is provisional, and it progresses in this sort of trial and error way, and there aren't any metaphysical pronouncements made about what's actually going on behind the phenomena, behind the experiment that we can observe. But some scientists will say that, Richard Dawkins say, he's a metaphysical scientist. He's a scientist who has done experiments, collected data, but ignored other data, focused on the data that confirmed his theory. And, to a certain extent, this is how science works. Scientists, individual scientists, profess belief in a particular perspective or theory, and they work to prove that theory, while others work to prove their theory. And eventually, as more and more research is done, some theories are deemed, impossible, or just not the best explanation, and others win. And if scientists didn't firmly believe in what they were trying to prove, we wouldn't ever get better theories. So in a sense, it's necessary to assert these metaphysical certainties into the world. But for a person trying to get an actual understanding of what science is, we can't assume that it is about giving us a one single objective truth about the world. Neither can we say that about spirituality. Each of these things, science and spirituality, to my mind, are about describing experience. And for people that have had a spiritual experience that certainly has a correlate in the brain, but people who have had this neural correlate in their brain no longer interpret it as just a mere physiochemical aberration or malfunction of their brain. They see it as the single most meaningful experience of their entire lives. Eternity somehow comes out in between time, because a person will have grown up normally into the world and adopted the rational outlook of common sense that everybody believes and shares with one another, but then had one of these experiences, and in that brief span of time been completely removed from all of that conditioning and talk and language and emotional baggage that shaped them as a personality in time and space. For a brief moment, they're taken out of that, shown the eternal, unconditioned reality of emptiness or non-duality or pure light. There's many ways of describing it. And then after it's over, they're brought back into this body, this individual personality with an individual family and geographical location and responsibilities and all these things. But after that moment of eternity, that person is never the same again. And there have even been, scientific double-blind studies done on people who were administered psilocybin. There was a study a few years ago at Johns Hopkins University where it was double-blind studies. Some people were given Ritalin and some people were given psilocybin. The people given psilocybin, 60% of them reported having the most meaningful experience of their lives up to that point. So I think this discrepancy in temperaments between the metaphysical scientist, or the one who really just isn't necessarily metaphysical, but just isn't able to buy into the whole spiritual reality stuff because they haven't had the experience. Because it seems to me once you've had the experience, you no longer emotionally react against seeing something like Jill's performance at TED. You see that as, in fact, the natural course of scientific understanding and knowledge, that eventually it all comes back around again, and what we thought was going to be this objective truth about the world is in fact what we always already had right at our very core. It's an interesting dichotomy, isn't it? It makes things interesting, at least. It keeps everybody on their toes. But yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. Thanks everybody who watched the video and commented on it, and I'll post a link to it again in this video in case anybody hasn't seen it yet. So yeah, let me know what you think, and take it easy.